Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/Brian E. Denton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading and reflection is on Chapter 49. Old Prince Nicholas Bolkonsky received a letter from Prince Vasily in November 1805 announcing that he and his son would be paying him a visit. I'm starting on a journey of inspection, and of course I shall think nothing of an extra 70 miles to come and see you at the same time, my honored benefactor, wrote Prince Vasily. My son Anatoly is accompanying me on his way to the army, so I hope you will allow him personally to express the deep respect that, emulating his father, he feels for you. It seems there would be no need to bring Mary out. Suitors are coming to us of their own accord, and cautiously remarked the little princess on hearing the news. Prince Nicholas frowned, but said nothing. A fortnight after the letter, Prince Vasily's servants came one evening in advance of him, and his son arrived the next day. Old Bolkonsky had always had a poor opinion of Prince Vasily's character, but more so recently, since in the new reigns of Paul and Alexander, Prince Vasily had risen to high position and honors, and now, from the hints contained in this letter and given by the little princess, he saw which way the wind was blowing, and his low opinion changed into a feeling of contemptuous ill will. He snorted whenever he mentioned him. On the day of Prince Vasily's arrival, Prince Bolkonsky was particularly discontented and out of temper. Whether he was in a bad temper because of Prince Vasily was coming, or whether his being in a bad temper made him especially annoyed at Prince Vasily's visit, he was in a bad temper, and in the morning Tikhon had already advised the architect not to go to the prince with his report. "Do you hear how he's walking?" said Tikhon, drawing the architect's attention to the sound of the prince's footsteps, stepping flat on his heels. "We know what that means." However, at 9 o'clock, the prince, in his velvet coat with a sable collar and cap, went out for his usual walk. It had snowed the day before, and the path to the hothouse, along which the prince was in the habit of walking, had been swept. The marks of the broom were still visible in the snow, and a shovel had been left sticking in one of the soft snowbanks that bordered both sides of the path. The prince went through the conservatories, the serfs' quarters, and the outbuildings, frowning and silent. "Can a sleigh pass?" he asked his overseer, a venerable man, resembling his master in manners and looks, who was accompanying him back to the house. "The snow is deep. I am having the avenue swept, your honor." The prince bowed his head and went up to the porch. "God be thanked," thought the overseer. "The storm has blown over." "It would have been hard to drive up, your honor," he added. "I heard, your honor, that a minister is coming to visit your honor." The prince turned around to the overseer and fixed his eyes on him, frowning. "What? A minister? What minister? Who gave orders?" he said in his shrill, harsh voice. "The road is not swept for the princess my daughter, but for a minister? For me there are no ministers." "Your honor, I thought—" "You thought!" shouted the prince, his words coming more and more rapidly and indistinctly. "You thought! Rascals, blackguards, I'll teach you to think." And lifting his stick, he swung it and would have hit Alpatych, the overseer, had not the latter instinctively avoided the blow. "Thought! Blackguards!" shouted the prince rapidly. But although Alpatych, frightened at his own temerity in avoiding the stroke, came up to the prince, bowing his bald head resignedly before him, or perhaps for that very reason, the prince, though he continued to shout, "Blackguards, throw the snow back on the road," did not lift his stick again, but hurried into the house. Before dinner, Princess Mary and Mademoiselle Bourienne, who knew that the prince was in a bad mood, stood waiting for him. Mademoiselle Bourienne with a radiant face that said, "I know nothing, I am the same as usual," and Princess Mary pale, frightened, and with downcast eyes. What she found hardest to bear was to know that on such occasions she ought to behave like Mademoiselle Bourienne, but she could not. She thought, if I seem not to notice, he will think that I do not sympathize with him. If I am sad and out of spirits myself, he will say, as he has done before, that I'm in the dumps. The prince looked at his daughter's frightened face and snorted. Fool, or dummy, he muttered. The other one is not here. They've been telling tales, he thought, referring to the little princess who was not in the dining room. Where's the princess? He asked. Hiding? She is not very well, answered Mademoiselle Bourienne with a bright smile, so she won't come down. It's natural in her state. Muttered the prince, sitting down. His plate seemed to him not quite clean, and pointing to a spot, he flung it away. Tikhon caught it and handed it to the footman. The little princess was not unwell, but had such an overpowering fear of the prince that hearing he was in a bad humor, she had decided not to appear. I'm afraid for the baby, she said to Mademoiselle Bourienne. Heaven knows what a fright might do. In general, at Bald Hills, the little princess lived in constant fear, and with a sense of antipathy to the old prince which she did not realize, because the fear was so much the stronger feeling. The prince reciprocated this antipathy, but it was overpowered by his contempt for her. When the little princess had grown accustomed to life at Bald Hills, she took a special fancy to Mademoiselle Bourienne, spent whole days with her, asked her to sleep in her room, and often talked with her about the old prince and criticized him. So we are to have visitors, mon prince, remarked Mademoiselle Bourienne, unfolding her white napkin in her rosy fingers. His Excellency Prince Vasily Kuragin and his son, I understand, she said inquiringly. His Excellency is a puppy. I got him his appointment in the service, said the prince disdainfully. Why his son is coming, I don't understand. Perhaps Princess Elizabeth and Princess Mary know. I don't want him. He looked at his blushing daughter. Are you unwell today? Afraid of the minister, as that idiot Alpatech called him this morning? No, mon père. Though Mademoiselle Bourienne had been so unsuccessful in her choice of subject, she did not stop talking, but chattered about the conservatories and the beauty of the flower she had just opened. And after the soup, the prince became more genial. After dinner, he went to see his daughter-in-law. The little princess was sitting at a small table, chatting with Masha, her maid. She grew pale on seeing her father-in-law. She was much altered. She was now plain rather than pretty. Her cheeks had sunk, her lips were drawn up, and her eyes drawn down. Yes, I feel a kind of oppression, she said in reply to the prince's question as to how she felt. Do you want anything? No, merci, mon père. Well, all right. He left the room and went to the waiting room where Alpatich stood with bowed head. Has the snow been shoveled back? Yes, your excellency. Forgive me, for heaven's sake. It was my own stupidity. All right, interrupted the prince. And laughing his unnatural way, he stretched out his hand for Alpatich to kiss, and then proceeded to his study. Prince Vasily arrived that evening. He was met in the avenue by coachmen and footmen who, with loud shouts, dragged his sleighs up to one of the lodges over the road purposely laden with snow. Prince Vasily and Anatoly had separate rooms assigned to them. Anatoly, having taken off his overcoat, sat with arms akimbo before a table on a corner of which he smilingly and absent-mindedly fixed his large and handsome eyes. He regarded his whole life as a continual round of amusement, which someone, for some reason, had to provide to him. And he looked on this visit to a churlish old man and a rich and ugly heiress in the same way. All this might, he thought, turn out very well and amusingly. And why not marry her, if she has so much money? That never does any harm, thought Anatoly. He shaved and scented himself with the care and elegance which had become habitual to him, and his handsome head held high, entered his father's room with the good-humored and victorious air natural to him. Prince Vasily's two valets were busy dressing him, and he looked round with much animation and cheerfully nodded his son as the latter entered, as if to say, "Yes, that's how I want you to look." "I say, father, joking apart, is she very hideous?" Anatoly asked, as if continuing a conversation the subject of which had been mentioned during the journey. "Enough, what nonsense! Above all, try to be respectful and cautious with the old prince." "If he starts a row, I'll go away," said Prince Anatoly. "I can't bear those old men. Remember, for you everything depends on this." In the meantime, Not only was it known in the maidservants' rooms that the minister and his son had arrived, but the appearance of both had been minutely described. Princess Mary was sitting alone in her room, vainly trying to master her agitation. "Why did they write? Why did lies tell me about it? It can never happen," she said, looking at herself in the glass. "How shall I enter the drawing room? Even if I like him, I can't now be myself with him." The mere thought of her father's look filled her with terror. The little princess and Mademoiselle Bourienne had already received Masha, the lady's maid, the necessary report of how handsome the minister's son was, with his rosy cheeks and dark eyebrows, and with what difficulty the father had dragged his legs upstairs while the son had followed him like an eagle, 3 steps at a time. Having received this information, the little princess and Mademoiselle Bourienne, whose chattering voices had reached her from the corridor, went into Prince Mary's room. "You know they've come, Mary," said the little princess, waddling in and sinking heavily into an armchair. She was no longer in the loose gown she generally wore in the morning, but had on one of her best dresses. Her hair was carefully done and her face was animated, which, however, did not conceal its sunken and faded outlines. Dressed as she used to be in Petersburg society, it was still more noticeable how much plainer she had become. Some unobtrusive touch had been added to Mademoiselle Bourienne's toilet, which rendered her fresh and pretty face yet even more attractive. "What, are you going to remain as you are, dear princess?" she began. "They'll be announcing what the gentlemen are in the drawing room, and we'll have to go down. You have not smartened up yourself at all." The little princess got up, rang for the maid, and hurriedly and merrily began to devise and carry out a plan of how Princess Mary should be dressed. Princess Mary's self-esteem was wounded by the fact that the arrival of a suitor agitated her, and still more so by both her companions not having the least conception that it could be otherwise. To tell them that she felt ashamed for herself and for them would be to betray her agitation, while to decline their offers to dress her would prolong their banter and insistence. She flushed. Her beautiful eyes grew dim, red blotches came on her face, and it took on the unattractive martyr-like expression it so often wore, as she submitted herself to Mademoiselle Bourienne and Liza. But these women quite sincerely tried to make her look pretty. She was so plain that neither of them could think of her as a rival, so they began dressing her with perfect sincerity, and with the naive and firm conviction women have that dress can make a face pretty. "No, really, my dear, this dress is not pretty," said Liza, looking sideways at Princess Mary from a little distance. "You have a maroon dress. Have it fetched. Really, you know the fate of your whole life may be at stake. But this one is too light. It's not becoming." It was not the dress, but the face and the whole figure of Princess Mary that was not pretty. But neither Mademoiselle Bourienne nor the little princess felt this. They still thought that if a blue ribbon were placed in the hair combed up, and the blue scarf arranged lower on the best maroon dress, and so on, all would be well. They forgot that the frightened face and the figure could not be altered, and that however they might change the setting and adornment of that face, it would still remain piteous and plain. After 2 or 3 changes to which Princess Mary meekly submitted, just as her hair had been arranged on the top of her head, a style that quite altered and spoiled her looks, and she had put on a maroon dress with a pale blue scarf, the little princess walked twice around her, now adjusting a fold of the dress with her little hand, now arranging the scarf, and looking at her with her head bent first on one side and then the other. "No, it will not do," she said decidedly, clasping her hands. "No, Mary, really, this dress does not suit you. I prefer you in your little gray everyday dress. Now please, do it for my sake, Katie," she said to the maid. "Bring the princess her gray dress, and you'll see, Mademoiselle Bourienne, how I shall arrange it," she added, smiling with a foretaste of artistic pleasure. But when Katie brought the required dress, Princess Mary remained sitting motionless before the glass, looking at her face, and saw in the mirror her eyes full of tears and her mouth quivering, ready to burst into sobs. "Come, dear princess," said Mademoiselle Bourienne. "Just one more little effort." The little princess, taking the dress from the maid, came up to Princess Mary. "Well, now we'll arrange something quite simple and becoming," she said. The 3 voices, hers, Mademoiselle Bourienne's, and Katie's, who was laughing at something, mingled in a merry sound, like the chirping of birds. "No, leave me alone," said Princess Mary. Her voice sounded so serious and so sad that the chirping of the birds was silenced at once. They looked at the beautiful, large, thoughtful eyes full of tears and of thoughts, gazing shiningly and imploringly at them, and understood that it was useless and even cruel to insist. "Didn't I tell you," she went on, turning reproachfully to Mademoiselle Bourienne, "Mary's is a face with such a coiffure does not sit in the least. Not in the least. Please change it." Coiffe? I don't know what that word is. "Leave me alone. Please leave me alone. It's all quite the same to me," answered a voice struggling with tears. Mademoiselle Bourienne and the little princess had to own to themselves that Princess Mary in this guise looked very plain, worse than usual, but it was too late. She was looking at them with an expression they both knew, an expression thoughtful and sad. This expression in Princess Mary did not frighten them. She never inspired fear in anyone. But they knew that when it appeared on her face, she became mute and was not to be shaken in her determination. "You will change it, won't you?" said Liza. And as Princess Mary gave no answer, she left the room. Princess Mary was left alone. She did not comply with Liza's request. She not only left her hair as it was, but she did not look in her glass. Letting her arms fall helplessly, she sat with her downcast eyes and pondered. A husband, a man, a strong, dominant, and strangely attractive being rose in her imagination and carried her into a totally different happy world of his own. She fancied a child, her own, such as she had seen the day before in the arms of her nurse's daughter, at her own breast, the husband standing by and gazing tenderly at her and the child. But no, it's impossible. I am too ugly, she thought. "Please come to tea. The prince will be out in a moment," came the maid's voice at the door. Mary roused herself and felt appalled at what she had been thinking, and before going down, she went into the room where the icons hung, and her eyes fixed on the dark face of a large icon of the Savior lit by a lamp. She stood before it with folded hands for a few moments. A painful doubt filled her soul. Could the joy of love, of earthly love for a man, be for her? In her thoughts of marriage, Princess Mary dreamed of happiness and of children, but her strongest, most deeply hidden longing was for earthly love. The more she tried to hide this feeling from others, and even from herself, the stronger it grew. "Oh, God," she said, "how am I to stifle in my heart these temptations of the devil? How am I to renounce forever these vile fancies, so as peacefully to fulfill thy will?" And scarcely had she put that question than God gave her the answer in her own heart. "Desire nothing for thyself, seek nothing, be not anxious or envious. Man's future and thy own fate must remain hidden from thee. But live so that thou mayest be ready for anything. If it be God's will to prove thee in the duties of marriage, be ready to fulfill his will." With this consoling thought, but yet with a hope for the fulfillment of her forbidden earthly longing, Princess Mary sighed, and having crossed herself, went down, thinking neither of her gown and coiffure, nor of how she would go in, nor what she would say. What could all that matter in comparison with the will of God, without whose care not a hair of a man's head can fall? All right, so that completes my reading of chapter 49, complete with a butchering of the French language and my ignorance of the same. I will now read my reflection on chapter 49. A Year of War and Peace, Day 49. Pop-offs and Prayers. We're back on the Bolkonsky estate at Bald Hills, where things are just as the old prince likes them, fearful, agitated, and contemptuous. That's not a recipe for happiness most would whip up, but the old prince serves a steady diet of it nonetheless. We open the chapter with a letter from Prince Vasily stating his intentions to visit with his son Anatoly. It's obvious to all the purpose of this visit. Vasily, having already secured a rich husband for his daughter, now seeks a rich wife for his son. But the old prince isn't having it. He won't be so easily outwitted by Vasily. It's instructive to note the differences in Pierre's response in yesterday's chapter to the old prince's response today. Pierre caves immediately. He just accepts whatever Prince Vasily offers. Not so with Prince Bolkonsky. When the old prince learns that his overseer has ordered the road swept of snow so as to allow Vasily easy access, the old prince pops off, ordering the snow to be immediately swept back into the road. One of the funniest moments in the novel is picturing the Bolkonsky serfs scrambling to sweep up all that snow back into the road, while wondering why their boss is such a fucking lunatic. With great difficulty, Prince Vasily and his son Anatoly manage to reach Bald Hills. They're shown to their rooms. Prince Vasily makes it clear to his son that this meeting is of the utmost importance. But Anatoly has the discernment of the world's dumbest donkey, the morals of a mafioso, and the judgment of so many pigeon droppings. All he can think about is about the possibility of marriage to someone like Princess Mary is that it'd be amusing, and that to marry a rich person never does any harm. He only gets better, ladies and gentlemen. Meanwhile, Princess Mary is in a state of mental and spiritual agitation. She's totally lost about what to do. On the one hand, she longs for a family. In particular, she desires to know the love of a man. But also, she'd also like a child. These carnal desires are tempered, however, by strong religious devotion. She prays for the strength to overcome these temptations. She asks God how she can tame them and live peacefully. The answer is quickly forthcoming. And scarcely had she put that question than God gave her the answer in her own heart, Tolstoy writes. Desire nothing for thyself. Seeking nothing. Be not anxious or envious. Man's future and thy own fate must be ready to fulfill his will. Princess Mary is the first character to understand the Stoic principles of indifference to events that we've been discussing throughout our readings. It's no surprise, then, that she is also the only one of our main characters, so far at least, to achieve at least some semblance of mental tranquility. Sure, she's temporarily agitated throughout the course of the novel, but at heart she's calm and assured, even here in the early stages. We'll see this in the next few chapters. We'll also see that it takes the entire novel for the rest of the main characters to follow her and achieve happiness. That's why Princess Mary is one of my favorite characters in this book. It's important to consider exactly what it is Princess Mary comes to understand in this chapter. Her insight, at least as I see it, is that one should not take life so personally. This isn't to say that one should withdraw from life, only that one should never invest so much personally in a venture over which one has so little control. This insight, I believe, is what makes Princess Mary one of the more resilient characters in the novel, particularly in these early chapters. Daily meditation. Whatever of the things which are not within thy power thou shalt suppose to be good for thee or evil, it must of necessity be that, if such a bad thing befall thee, or the loss of such a good thing, thou wilt blame the gods, and hate men too. Those who are the cause of the misfortune or the loss, or those who suspected or being likely to be the cause. And indeed, we do much injustice because we make a difference between these things, which we do no regard these things as indifferent. But if we judge only those things which are in our power to be good or bad, there remains no reason either for finding fault with God or standing in a hostile attitude to man. Marcus Aurelius, Meditation. All right, that concludes my reading and reflection on chapter 49 of War and Peace. Thanks for listening. Hope you liked it. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook, A Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation at PayPal. The links to all that are below. Tomorrow, we will be reading and reflecting on chapter 50 of War and Peace. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and of others.